there we are. Hallelujah. Good morning, everybody. So delighted to be here. I'm so happy that I made it down here for a variety of reasons. A place that's near and dear to my heart is the Orange County version of Agape. And I did start in Orange County. I started at the Fullerton Church of Religious Science many, many years ago, a long time ago. And that was the first place I ever heard Dr. Michael speak. And as they say, after that, it was history. I knew about him before he spoke. We'll just say it that way. So, Orange County. So I've lived in Orange County. My in-laws lived in Newport Beach. Just let me just say all of this, and then I can go on with the talk, okay? And so as I drove down here, it was like, oh yeah, bringing the kids down to see Grandma and Grandpa, you know. And I can't believe they've been gone for 12 years. So yeah. Anyway. So I'm a little bit familiar with this area. And the other thing that feels so familiar to me is this whole starting a new center. As you may imagine, having been a founding member, having been of Agape, having been in Dr. Michael's living room, by invitation only, by the way. You didn't get to just call him up and say, oh, I want to be there. It was by invitation only. So I'm not sure at the time how much I appreciated that, but certainly in retrospect, you know, kind of like when you don't know, you don't have the contrast, and you don't know the difference. As I found out later, there were other people who wanted to be there, and when we're not invited, we'll say it that way. It's a nice way to say it. I was the only person who was invited who was not a practitioner of some sort. I'd had some science of mind training. The only other person who was a part of that was his mother. And as I always say, I knew why she was there. And the reading that I gave you this morning, Testament of Devotion, comes from the book, the first book that I got. Alice is Dr. Michael's mother, and of course she passed away. But so she started the Agape bookstore in the trunk of her car, and after one of our meetings, we weren't in a center, we weren't a church, we were just meeting in the living room, and he referenced the book, and I wanted the book, and I went out to her car and bought it from her. So all of this has history and has meaning for me. And when they talked about helping take down everything, you know, when we first started Agape, so I lived in Orange County and went to LA over and over and over again, you may know. I had very small children at the time. And I had the trees. So I look at the trees and I think, who's carrying these trees around in the back of their car? Because that's what I did. My girlfriend would look at the car and say, are there people in there? All of this. It's wonderful to be here. It sort of feels like I've come home to some degree, obviously. That's why I'm saying all of this. So the fabulous topic that I was given was spiritual spring cleaning. And then what Spirit told me to talk about was the light, interestingly enough. It was actually before I had been on the website and saw so much about what the light means to this community. But the light means a lot to me. It's been the leading edge of my consciousness for many, many years. It informs me of what I am to be informed of. It opens things up when they need to be opened up. And then when it seems as though the light is not so present, by contrast, it shows me to go deeper. So the light for me is quite expressive. So the topic I chose was Let the Sun Shine In. I will say to you, God gave me that title. I had a lot of arguments for a couple of days until they finally said, we need your topic now. And I said, okay. And so let the sun shine in. And of course what that means to me is that the brilliant light of the infinite that God is. A lot of people, Dr. Ricky Byers-Beckwith talks about that for her, for many years, for her, what she, you know, thought about as being God was the sun. And it is for a lot of people. So letting the sunshine come in. I have a quote from Hildegard Bingen, if you're at all acquainted with her. She was a mystic and the first women's lib person ever, one of them, if you read about what she brought forward. She's an amazing soul from in Bavaria. I love this quote from her. I, who am the Ancient of Days, do declare that I am the day by myself alone. I am the day that does not shine by the sun. Rather, by me, the sun is ignited. That speaks of consciousness. That speaks of an illumined consciousness, that she knew who she was, and She was allowing for more and more of God to bring itself forward in a time when that just wasn't done. You know, she ended up with her own nunnery that was unheard of. There was a lot that she brought forward as far as music, as far as writing, and really being her own presence, her own being of light. But by me, the sun is ignited. Wouldn't that be interesting for you to take that on today? To go forward and just think about the vastness. I know it's a bit overwhelming, but here we go. That's what we're called to do. We're called to take on the largest space in consciousness that we are available to. And what does that mean? That means that through our profound willingness, through the setting of a spiritual intention, by an activation of the energy of unconditional love, that whatever it is that we take on, and I more want to say that Spirit gives to us, because to say something like, by me the sun is ignited, I'm very clear that that's not an ego thing. We're not talking about it from the mind. We're talking about it from something deep in the heart of the being of the soul that says there's more here. And you are the one that can bring it. You are the one that is the light. You are the one that can now allow light to glow effervescently, dynamically. I don't even know if this is a word. Luminescently. Do we think that's a word? Oh, well, it is now. Luminescently. Okay, anyway. But by me, the sun is ignited. I would like you to contemplate that as we go forward. So you know that we're all light beings, you know, and I contemplate the light myself a lot, the star shine and moon glow, earth glow, grace light, beams of light, bursts of light, and that everything is aglow and a glitter with life, even the inanimate objects. There's something at the core and at the center, and even Mother Earth herself glows with the light of the highest heaven. When you have the consciousness that can be available to it. When I talk about this topic of saying, let the sun shine in, the argument I kept having with Spirit within myself was that there is no real light outside of ourselves, right? If I was going to really title this the way I would want to, for my mind, I would say, let the light glow out. So I got to put it in by saying, glow for God. So it's like letting the sunshine or the glow of the infinite of our own soul come to the light of our awareness. And there's many ways that you can do that. But if you want to explore that, you can investigate and find out more and more and more about what that means. You know, many years ago, I was at an Asilomar conference when Science of Mind had the Asilomar conferences. Since they don't have them now. And I remember at a workshop I went to, what they passed around that really spoke to me was that by a certain kind of photography, they could show that the atoms and the cells of the body would respond to consciousness. And of course, they would respond by a correspondence and activation of an impartation, an imputation of a divine idea. In other words, you could say prayer, or you could say a high thought of God. I mean, it can be many ways you would express it. But the picture they passed around was the cells of the body that were lit up, and they found a way to show that. I've always wanted to get that and carry it around with me and say, see. It's at the core of our being. We know, we are told metaphorically that we are born of the great light that gave birth to itself. They called each of us to come into this place at this time to illumine from our own souls outward in a way, shape, and form that allows every being to know their own light, to know their own truth, to know their own divinity. I firmly believe that as we do our own inner practice of being in tune with the light of our own souls, and I'll say a little more about that later, but that as we do that, this is how we are a beneficial presence on the planet. Because I think sometimes people say they can question this idea of doing so much inner work, but the thing of it is, it translates. It has a very direct translation, so that when you know who you are, when you know that you are the light of the world, really, without you ever having to say a word, everybody around you, wherever you go, whether you're at the bank or the credit union, the gas station, the market, wherever you are, the beings who can be in tune with it, it sparks something in them. It wakes them up. There's many times when you can think in your life where you can think about, why did I wake up right then? You understand when I use that term, that what I'm talking about is frequently we go through our day and we may be caught in something we don't know, or something we're trying to figure out, or we're trying to find a solution. And to me, that always feels like we sort of have tunnel vision, right? Because, I mean, we're trying to figure it out with our mind. And then it can seem like suddenly something shifts and you don't know, but that somebody close, or even somebody across the world, brought you into awareness through the light of their own being. And it sparks something in you without ever having to say a word. I believe that this is how we bring healing to the planet. This is how we allow Mother Earth to heal and wake up to her own true divine nature. This is how transformation in a wonderful and awesome way happens. So it is by knowing the light of our own divinity that we make a profound difference. And first we make a profound difference for ourselves. First we say yes to the light that we are with ourselves. First we go into our own interiority, as Dr. Michael likes to say. Gosh, I actually said the word. Anyway, we can go deeply within that. And in self-investigation through the energy of love, always backed by the energy of love. So it's not criticism, it's not judgment. It can feel uncomfortable. There's enough uncomfortability. We don't have to add that zing of judgment to it, you know. We look within ourselves and we find the places where we call forth actually the exact meditation that I did with you this morning, and say, let there be light. Let there be light. It's a wonderful, if you take that with you also today and say, okay, anytime I'm worrying, anytime I'm in doubt, anytime I'm in fear, if I know and trust that there's a luminous presence of my own being that knows more than I do, and yet it is inherently within me, so I have access to it by right of consciousness. In other words, it's nothing I need to do to make happen or earn, and yet the part I do have to do is activate it, right? Does that make sense? It's an activation. We have to tune in and say yes, and be in agreement that now it's going to find a way to fulfill itself. It may not always come in the exact moment, but it will show up. It probably will come, as we like to say, in a moment when we're not necessarily looking for it, but suddenly out of the blue, the light dawns, you know, within our own souls. And some way that we have never thought of to heal, to reveal a solution, for us to be better, for us to have a better conversation maybe, to have more healing. Suddenly, something clarifies itself. This is what I use. So I'm just giving you the tools that I use for myself. And so I can tell you that it definitely works. So we know ourselves by the light of the I Am presence. You know, the I Am is the Christed consciousness, the beloved, the one, the light that glows through that presence. I know myself by my relationship to the light that I am expressing. We also know ourselves in relationship to the places where we may be reticent to express the light for whatever reason. Usually it's because we think we're right about something, and we're more interested in feeling right about something than in showing forth the light. The right or the light? Okay. So, but you understand what I'm saying. We know ourselves by how we express. We also know ourselves in contrast in the places within our own hearts where it may seem challenging or it may seem difficult, when maybe we have to go that extra mile. And yet it's still fruitful ground to go deeper and say, how can I have more light in this, in my own soul? Not about anybody else. It's never about anybody else. So we know ourselves in those ways. I am described to myself by my own light nature. In other words, when you meditate, it is the luminosity of the presence within you which shows you back to yourself. The light reveals more of who you are. You may not always get it that way. I understand that. I'm just describing it is the eternal light that glows back to you who you really are. So if you feel deep calm, deep peace, deep presence, connection, whatever that is, you're knowing that by turning within to your light nature. We cannot, there's no way we can ever stop or block or, you know, the flow, the movement, the activity of this light expressing, what I say here is we can run, but we can't hide from it. We can pretend like we're not worthy, but the thing of it is the light just knows itself, and it will not stop, because the light is always glowing, it's always showing forth more of itself, and it's just going to find a way. Light is just going to glow itself forward into form. And then sometimes it seems like in some of the dark places, when we don't know what's going to happen, we can just be still and allow the light to show us just step by incremental step. There's a story about light. It's one of my favorite stories from Apollo 13. If anybody's ever heard it, I love this. And Jim Lovell, the astronaut, was being interviewed. He was being interviewed, remember Apollo 13? So they were up there and there was all that stuff going on, and they weren't really sure they were going to get back. This is actually a true story. It was in the movie. I researched it and found out it was a true story, and I found an interview of him. And the reporter was asking him about any other experience he'd had with fear. Basically, I think he was asking, how did you get over the fear? But he told sort of a very different story, which is why it's great. So he says that he was out in his Banshee at night in combat conditions. And so there was no running lights on the aircraft carrier that he was supposed to be trying to land on. They were in the Sea of the Sea of Japan, and his radar had jammed, his homing signal was gone, because somebody in Japan was actually using the same frequency, and so it was actually leading him away from where he was supposed to be landing. So he was looking down at a big black ocean, and he decided he would turn on his map light. So he flipped on the switch, and the whole thing fizzled out. The whole thing just kind of blew out. So he's there in his airplane. He has absolutely no light. He knows that he's running out of fuel, and even if he could follow the homing signal, it's leading him away from where he wants to go. And he says he thinks he was going to have to ditch the ocean. He says, so then I looked down, and there in the ocean, there's this big green trail. It's bioluminescence. It's a long carpet laid out right before me, and it's the phosphorescence that gets churned up in the wake of a big ship. And so he followed it, and it led him straight back to the aircraft carrier. And he says, so you never know what's going to transpire to lead you home. Isn't that interesting? I know. That's one of my favorite stories, because it's about the light. And it's about that sometimes when it seems very dark, we have to, and in his case, literally, we get to tune in and be aware of what our options are. And of course, what we would say, metaphysically, what we would say spiritually, it would be about being willing to be available to the light that is within your awareness, even if you don't feel it. Because I'm talking about it, but there's lots and lots of times when we don't necessarily feel it. We ourselves don't tune into it. But yet, even if with only our intellect, we can at least have a thought that somebody knows the light of my real identity. There's somebody on the planet that knows who I am and the light of my own soul. You can always lean into, for example, an agape licensed spiritual practitioner or a practitioner here, or your minister, and know that they know the light that you are. The good news is, although that sounds like it's maybe separate, it's actually not. It's just a way simply that you are accessing the great light of your own being. Sometimes, it looks like we have to access it through what appears to be other people. In other words, when you say, but my practitioner knows the light of my being. But there's only one consciousness. There's only one light. There's only one knower. There's only one being, and it's God. It's the I am, the Atman, the beloved, the beautiful. It is the one great light. And we can tune into it in a variety of ways, through our own spiritual practice, of course, through our own meditation, through our affirmative prayer, for all of the things spiritual study, through our willingness to simply be awake to it. You know, that's a very powerful intention. When you say to yourself, I claim for myself, I am willing to be awake to the light of my soul today. And then you don't get to dictate to yourself how that shows up. That the mind wants to jump right in there and make some stuff happen. But you can say it, you can set it as an intention. That you're willing to wake up and to allow the light of your being to be the luminous sense of your being in every way that you walk. Now, what does this have to do to get back to the topic of spiritual spring cleaning? As we clear with the energy of light, as we clear, I don't even like to use that word dark, because I've heard people misinterpret that, and I don't have time to give a whole other talk on it. So it's not dark, it's only dark to a sense that we may have, and what we know is it's simply the place in ourselves where the light has as yet to be recognized. That's what, and it's like, when I use that term, sense darkness specifically, that's human sense. There is no place where the light is not. So when we clear those places up within ourselves through our inner work and shining the light of love within our souls and being willing to release and to let go of anything that no longer serves us, then you know what happens with the light? The light is actually refracted through us. It comes from the inside out. Thank you, God, I know it's let the sunshine in, but anyway, the light is refracted through our own beliefs about life. Does that make sense? You may have to think about that. But it's like it's actually transparent, interesting, and it's not dark. We just think it's dark because we can't yet see. So it's like a layer, and the light is trying to blow itself out. It's refracted through our body of belief. It literally bends, which is refraction, and has a particular appearance. But as we release and let go of those old thought patterns, now we are more in tune, and there's less, there's a word I want, I'll think of it in 10 minutes now. Anyway, it's less convoluted, so to speak. It's the light is more directly expressing, and our light is more directly expressing the faith and the joy and the brilliant heart that God is. All right, I know it's time to move into the prayer. I got in the middle of 5 minutes. The things that I want you to keep in mind for yourself as we go forward from this moment is, I still like this. By me the sun is ignited. Take that on. That's deep. You can also work with let there be light. I've used that for many years. When anything comes into my awareness that I need clarity, and it's just to be still and let it reveal itself. You can ask yourself, how will I allow the light of my being to bend to God's will today? When we talk about soul refraction. Take yourselves lightly while taking your spiritual work seriously, and continually find ways to identify the celestial light of your own being. Yes? Yes. So I'm going to close with the prayer. I was going to close with an Om, but we did the Om. You know, in the Vedic texts, Om in ancient India is said to be the sound light made when it began its journey into form. Let's turn within. We always do this at Agape. We always close the talk with a prayer. So very, very grateful I am in this moment. I take this centering moment to evoke a living awareness of absolute gratitude. Grateful for God's life. Grateful for the eternal givingness and givenness of the I Am, the brilliant heart of God. I'm grateful in this moment to know that all that God is the I that I am, the divine I am of everyone, within the sound of my voice, everyone here. And as I allow the living word to speak, to know, to behold, to fulfill, to expand itself into greater and greater and greater awareness of direct knowing of itself. I speak the word for each of us this day. I am ever clear that before the one power and one life there is no other, there is only the one. It is sourced, supported, and supplied from its own energy of the clear, spacious light of the infinite. So each one here being sourced, supported, supplied permanently, that can never be taken away from anybody at all. no matter what happens in life itself, no matter what the vicissitudes are. There is always the power of the I am, the power of love, the power of the light. And each one here is radically held in the heart of the energy of love, of light. It permeates, it pervades, it provides, it supports, it supplies, it heals, it reveals, it fulfills. We speak a special word for our own Reverend Susan Shahani for her sister Sherry, knowing that right where Reverend Susan is, divine attendance by the Spirit of life and love is present with hers. They usher Sherry to the other side with loving arms and loving consciousness of pure grace. And anyone here that's holding anyone in their heart, I speak the word and know that right where that being is, God is. There's an active field of love. There is healing. There is revealing that is happening even now. Each one here, just say your name out loud. Say your name. Say your name out loud. And as that person has named themselves, God's on the field for that being of light, that being of love, that being of truth, that being of joy. So then all the myriad ways, shapes, and forms, that living spirit of life and of love is seeking to adore itself, to cherish itself, to bring itself forward. It is accomplished. It is done. Of this I have no doubt. I'm grateful to release the established word of love to the living faithfulness of divine law. To know before it is spoken and it is accomplished. Of this I am convinced beyond anything else. So in radiant gratitude, I know it is done, and I let it be by saying, and so it is. And so I let it be. Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's see, I have my order of service here somewhere. I believe now is the time of our offering. Do you have people who, do you have little baskets? Exactly. See, the Gabe, I would say, the ushers are coming forward. Oh, here's one. She said, beautiful. So I'm just going to invite you to take your offering in your hand. And although I haven't spoken about it, what we're acknowledging here is the law of circulation. You know, you may have heard it when you were a child, as what goes around comes around. It's kind of true. But we know that as we give in a rich and dynamic way, we give in support, we give in love, we always give because first God gave to us. We give because we are the givingness and givenness of the I am, of the joy, of the power, of the presence, of the light itself. I remind you that we can never outgive God, and that as you give, you're making a way for God to give more through you and as you, through absolute joy. Take your offering and just take a minute with me. How good it is to bless this offering, to know that the I am presence, the energy of radiant dynamic love is always giving, never runs out, never runs dry, and that this offering is pressed down and running over with a joyous, vitalizing, enthusiastic givingness of pure love. It blesses the giver, it blesses the receiver, it blesses the community, richly endowing it with every good and perfect thing to fulfill itself through grace. Of this I am assured, and I let it be by saying it is done. Amen.